Okay. Well, I'm standing here with Ivan from, is it Goffstown?
Goffstown, New Hampshire, yeah.
And you had an issue that you wanted to bring up in our concern, or something you wanted to praise. I don't know what it was, but something you wanted to talk about.
Just an interesting story. The concept of win-win, we've heard the, what it might be like to get yourself in a win-win situation where both parties win. But before I go into that, let me just introduce myself. I call myself a fiscal conservative, a social liberal, and an independent thinker. So that sort of sets the stage where I'm coming from. And I just, a month ago, got back from Ecuador. And I tell you about that, and it's kind of interesting because it's a very unique kind of country, I think. And they've stood up. The indigenous people has just passed a constitution in Ecuador and some of the other countries in the region. And what they're doing is deciding that not only people have inalienable rights, but the land, the trees, fish, and so forth. They're standing up for their own rights. And who they're standing up to are the corporations who would prefer to level the rainforest, take all the resources, take all the oil, so forth and so on. So what they are doing is interesting because, let me give you an example. In the capital city of Quito and Otavalo, another city not too far out of town, there are markets in South America that are well known. And it's frustrating for somebody from another hemisphere to go there because there are no prices on anything. And it's like, wow, how do I buy something? Well, it ends up being a negotiation. And what I mean is, if you want to buy a nice shirt, and they might ask them, Carnivalo, how much? And they'll say $10. And you turn around, and if you're all at a negotiator, you say, no, I'd like to pay $5. And that marketer turns around and says, well, you know, this is a nice shirt. It's got 6 buttons, long sleeves, braided, and all this. I really need $10. And, well, it's a... I really was looking for a short sleeve shirt. I'm a tourist. I'm on a tight budget. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 6. And then the person says, no, I really want 9. And then you think, well, no. And you start to walk away. There's one option. You could say no, because this negotiation is a voluntary thing. So you walk away, and if they're really inclined to sell you something, they might run after you and come back, well, I'll go 8. And then you make a counteroffer of 7. Well, I'd go 7 for that. And a little further negotiation, and you say, well, either party is going to say, well, I'll go $7.50. And it's like, okay. So you agree. And it's a win-win for both. You didn't buy it for 5, they didn't get 10. They didn't get 10, so they got $7.50. And to me, that's a good metaphor for a win-win circumstance. And we've got to do that on a much larger scale. If we're negotiating with corporations or in any number of situations, country to country, corporation to corporation, countries dealing with corporations, we need to use that same kind of strategy. It's got to be local, voluntary, and somebody must be willing to walk away.
Well, speaking of voluntary, though, I mean, sounds like you just described a system, and I'm not super familiar with the Ecuadorian system or the new rules, but if they're saying that the land has rights, then of course it's going to be the government that's deciding which land gets which rights and how to take the land rights and take them away from people. And I mean, isn't it?
It actually isn't that way. In Ecuador, the indigenous cultures, the Quechua, the Ashua, the Shua, the indigenous people are really running the show. So the government is in fear of them. And because the indigenous people are self-sufficient, they feed themselves, they don't eat heat on the equator, but they are totally self-sufficient. So if they don't need the government, they walk away. In Ecuador, the government is the people, not the corporations. So as contrasted with the United States, where the corporations are clearly, and I'm not against corporations, I'm against corrupt corporations. We have a handful, in my opinion, corrupt corporations running the show, and there's only a handful in each market segment, but that is not true in Ecuador. United Fruit, the oil companies, Chiquita Banana, Dole, they are not controlling Ecuador the way we are in this country, so it's the indigenous people. Believe it or not, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Have I heard that somewhere before?
Well, you heard it, but you probably haven't seen it. Not in this country.
I saw it in Ecuador, and I'm encouraged by that. And I think some other countries may, certainly it's happening in South America with 5 or 6 countries. We're reading in the current news it may be happening in the Middle East. I think there's some models that are desirable to follow. And ironically, if you think about it, our Constitution, our country, we were one of the first to language it. But what I'm suggesting is that there are other countries who have picked up on this and are making it happen, and maybe we won't be the first.
Well, and even if there is this failed experiment somewhere, at least people will learn from that.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to think that there are models and it's working elsewhere around the world. A you and me world, a world that works for everyone. A government of the people, by the people, for the people, who are free to negotiate, to walk away. It's voluntary, it's local, it's entrepreneurial, it's progressive, it's cooperative. I think those are all operative words that make it a win-win situation for everybody.
What do you think folks should do to move society in that direction that you want it to go, which I assume you want American society to go in that direction?
I think the key word is local. I think some might say, and it's certainly true, we have to change the government. But I think our Constitution suggests that we need to do it at the local level. There's Article 10 issues, but I really think the most effective way to do it is at the local level. 10 or 12 people in our own family, we have to transform and change our own families and immediate friends like that, and then we can do it on a larger scale, maybe up to 100 people in the community. So I actually think it'll work more effectively at the local level, and it'll be much easier. Change our own personal way of relating to others, do it with your family and friends, and then do it in your community. Create examples of success, and I think that can spread like wildfire.
All right. Well, Ivan, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
All right.